to the kids about copyright, especially with artists. I, for example, used the song on YouTube and YouTube blocked me. It was Prince's Party Man, and fair use didn't work. So can you explain to all of us, how does copyright work and how is it beneficial for artists?
Okay, so copyright is a form of intellectual property, which is effectively something that you create nearly from nothing. It's not a tangible object. The way a builder could build a house, obviously he has a property at the end of it. A songwriter or an author or a composer or anything like that, they have to create their property, which is intellectual property, from something that they think up or something that they imagine or something that they can create, whether it's music in my case, or you write a book or you do a film or something like that. Once you've created that intellectual property, you effectively own the rights to that. So that effectively will then become copyright under your ownership. You can then allocate that copyright control to particular publishers in an author situation, music publishers in a music situation, film studios, production companies. You can then assign your copyright that you own from the intellectual property to those businesses, to those companies. They can then monetize your art or whatever you want to call it, your intellectual property, and turn that into a revenue that can provide an income stream. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah. Yes, and I've tried to explain to the kids. Sorry, lots of them can't see you. Guys, I'm recording this, so please don't ask questions because it pops up on the recording. I will put this on our OneNote, and I'm also going to share it with my other business classes. Unfortunately, they say they can't see Michaela's phone. I can see it. I'm recording it. I will put it on. I've tried to explain to them how beneficial it is. I mean, even if people use your songs in advertisements or people at the Olympics using your song or radio stations playing your song, the artists still get the royalties.
Correct. So quite often we will get Netflix quite often lately where they will be doing a production of a movie or a TV series and they will want to use perhaps Truly Madly Deeply or I Knew I Loved You, To the Moon and Back, I Want You, any one of those songs. If they want to put that into the movie that they're creating or even in a commercial sense, what you just said, advertising. We don't do a lot of advertising because we don't like our music associated with particular brands, but that's just up to us. So we will refuse income possibilities sometimes because we won't want to be associated with a particular brand. But in a film situation or a TV show, they will ask for our rights to use our music in their production, and then they will pay us a royalty accordingly, or sometimes a flat fee, and you won't actually see a royalty. You'll just get paid, an X amount up front, and that's how that works.
All right, I've got one more question because this is more what I'm interested in. I know some of the students want to ask questions now. I hope it can still work, otherwise I'll ask it the questions that I can remember. For example, and this is not where I'm 100% sure, how does it actually work? And I would like to know if you do know. So if Nova plays your song 4 times a day, is it correct that every time it's played, you get an amount of money? Now, I tried to Google it and it sounded like it's less than 1 cent every time they play it. And after a quarter or 6 months, if there's 1,000 radio stations around the world, someone is collecting this money and then pay it to you guys. Do you know how much it costs radio stations, for example, to play an artist's song?
No, I don't know the exact amount. It gets very grey around that type of area. But what I do know is that those pennies, those cents every time your music is played, when there's thousands of radio stations worldwide, as you say, it does add up over a period of time. The radio stations or most media companies generally pay what they call a blanket license so that they can use any song that they want to broadcast. However, they have to log that song and they put the logs to the non-profit organisation who are collecting the royalties on behalf of artists. It gets quite complicated, but they will then log what songs they've played, and then that gets distributed to the artists accordingly.
Yeah, and that when you said logged, it reminded me because I did some radio in South Africa before I moved over, and we used to play CDs, and I remember I had to write the song, the artist, if I'm not sure, I think it was the record company and a code of the CD, and that was getting logged over. Are you still surprised? Are you guys still popular? And I want to say, do you still get a check in the mail? But obviously checks are out. Are you still surprised with the amount of times that Savage Garden songs are playing worldwide? In other words, all of a sudden there's a payment royalties.
Well, are you asking how much I earn?
No, well, if you want to tell me, that's it. But I mean, are you because I read one day that Bananarama covered the song Venus, and apparently it was a Dutch guy who originally sang it. And when Bananarama went #1 around the world, he one day opened his mailbox and there was like a check, and I can't remember the amount, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he was quite surprised. So are you guys still popular, and do you see that when royalties running?
Well, yeah, look, firstly, it still blows my mind that I'm getting paid for something that I created over 25 years ago. It literally, you know, I was 20 years old, 21 when I was writing these songs, and, you know, fast forward 25 years later, I'm still getting paid quite well from the airplay that we still managed to get. So fortunately, Savage Garden hasn't been completely forgotten about. It might not be the latest and greatest thing, but it still has a legacy that I'm very proud of, and that I'm very honoured to still receive income for. So, yeah, very, very fortunate.
Look, a lot of bands. I mean, John Farnham has had so many final tours. Some of these bands go on their final tour. Is there any chance Savage Garden will get back together?
Look, I would never say never.
Yeah.
But I don't know how popular two old guys in their walking frames will be anymore. I honestly don't know if that would ever happen. The one beautiful thing about the legacy of Savage Garden, from my point of view as an artist, as a writer, is that we never really had a downward spiral of success. We nearly jumped out before that was even possible. And in some ways, I kind of like leaving it on the top shelf. You know, it's untainted to a degree.
Yeah.
So if we got back together again, let's be honest, it's never as good as the first time. So it would just be one of those things that people go, they're doing it for the money or things like that. So I'm very careful as to what decisions I make with, I guess, my art and my legacy.
And I'm thinking, sorry, I didn't think that you will come on live, and now I'm actually taking over the show, but this is so great because my year 11s are doing something similar. And now I forgot what I want to ask about copyright.
Let me tell you, one of the Savage Garden's very last concert was in Cape Town, South Africa.
And I said that to the class that my wife is a big fan. I'm probably like most blokes. We never admit that we listen to ABBA or Boney M or Savage Garden. But you were huge in South Africa. And when I said to my wife, one of my students' dad, Daniel Jones, she goes, Savage Garden. And she was saying this song was her jams in year 12 in her school days. So you were huge there. I think, Holly, you want to ask a question, because I just got to rethink what I wanted to ask with the year 11s in a point of view. Holly, you've had a question, isn't it?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So how did Kristen Dunst get in your music video? Why did you use her? Were you guys friends, or did you just? Yeah.
Yeah, so she was quite an up-and-coming actress in Los Angeles at the time. We were shopping around to film. We're shopping around for a director to film the music video to "I Knew I Loved You," and we auditioned quite a few leading actresses. Kirsten Dunst became a bit of a because of her association with a movie called Interview with a Vampire. And that was a movie that Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt was in with Kirsten Dunst when she was only 12 or 13 years old. And it goes back to Savage Garden. The band name actually came from an Anne Rice book who wrote Interview with a Vampire. So there was sort of a full connection there between the Savage Garden name the particular movie or Interview with the Vampire and our music video. So yeah, it's just one of those things where the planets kind of align. But good question.
I'm going to jump in and Nines, if any of you have a question, please jump in, because I've just remembered what I want to ask. Talking about Kristen Dunst, I think Juliette Lewis was in another of your videos. And was the idea of using American actresses to break America? Because Robbie Williams, huge around the world, except for America, he couldn't break it. And he used, I think it was in Feel, Daryl Hannah to try and break that American market. So was it a conscious thing of Savage Garden using, like you said, up-and-coming American actresses?
It wasn't a conscious thing, but it was a convenience. We were filming these particular music videos in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles obviously is the home of Hollywood, where a lot of the actors and actresses live. So it wasn't, it was more of a convenience than a conscious sort of decision. We had fortunately already had Truly Madly Deeply, which was a #1 hit in America a couple of years prior. So we were very fortunate to get that success in America without really having to use American profiles.
Before I come to my last question, is there anybody else in the class who would like to ask a question?
Yeah. How did Savage Garden start?
Okay, so this is something that I think you should all be very conscious of, is that we started in Brisbane, and Darren and I met in a magazine advert where I was in a band looking for a lead singer. Darren had read that advert in a magazine called Time Off. It's like a little street press, bit before your time, but it was like a contact service, the way you guys do Facebook and Instagram now. You meet people online that live in the same area. Obviously, you have to be very careful about it now. But we went from meeting in Brisbane to forming a band to becoming, a very successful band throughout the world. And we were having, #1 hits and made millions of dollars and had great success. But the reality was we were just two normal guys from Brisbane. And that is the most significant part of my answer I want everyone to actually realise, is that it doesn't matter where you come from. Geography has nothing to do with your success. You can come from anywhere or any household, any income, and if you want to create something and show it to the world, I'm proof that that's possible.
Uh-huh.
And I want to concur that I think Savage Garden, in a sense, has made it easier for bands like Powderfinger, the Veronicas, because you have broken it, and people went, "Wow, a band from Brizzy to do that." I've got one more question, and this is more aimed at my year 11s currently, looking at a target market. Now, I did mention that most blokes would not admit we listen to ABBA, we listen to Savage Garden, Boney M, etc. But I guess we're not really the demographic you guys were looking at. If you had to explain your market niche, your target market, what was Savage Garden's target market when you were at the top of your game?
Okay, so it's a good question, but it doesn't have the answer you would think. So we didn't consciously create music for any particular demographic audience. We didn't say, hey, let's try and target 16 to 25-year-olds or male, female, whatever. We didn't think about any of that at all. And I understand that that is a business aptitude that you have to know, but it wasn't anything that we started out as a very conscious thing from a creative point of view. We wrote music that made us feel something, and we made music that we enjoyed. And it was original music. It didn't exist before we wrote it. So all of a sudden, my fourth song I ever wrote was To the Moon and Back. And when I listened to it back after recording it, I went, to me, this is on par with a lot of the world's music. It just sounded like it would sit in the same category. Fast forward a year, it was on the radio being played either side of U2 or Maroon 5 or any of those bands. Maybe not Maroon 5, it was a bit after. But those types of international bands. So we didn't go out to target a particular demographic. However, when I stood on stage on stages all over the world and played to tens of thousands of people. In front of me were people from 12, 13, male, female, up to 60, 70 years old, male or female, and everywhere in between. So we were very fortunate. We had a very large demographic, and demographic that ranged from, you know, Christians, the people that liked Christian music would also like us, people that liked, as I said, U2 or ABBA, or they liked our music. So we managed to reach such a large demographic, but not consciously.